All right. So before we get into the podcast, I just want to drop 2 quick ads and pay the bills. My name is Chio Dogu. I run a digital marketing agency based right here in the GTA. We do everything from helping clients launch podcasts, getting entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and speakers booked on podcasts as celebrity guests, creating lead generation campaigns for local businesses using Facebook ads, Instagram ads, LinkedIn ads, and YouTube ads. We also create landing pages and online funnels to help local businesses, entrepreneurs, and big businesses turn clicks into customers. If you're struggling to generate leads and grow your business, hit me up at info@odogwu.com, or you can get on my website at www.odogwu.com. That's www.odogwu.com. I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you're thinking. And with that said, let's get on with the show. Hey guys, welcome to another exciting episode of the GTA Business Titans podcast. I have a phenomenal guest on my show today. So before I tell you about my guest, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered if your accent is holding you back? Do you think it's possible that you could be losing credibility with your patients, your clients, your employers, and your colleagues just because of the way you sound? Or is it even possible that you might not have gotten hired or gotten that promotion you wanted just because of the way you sound? Or if you're like me, have you ever heard this statement before? Could you repeat that again? Well, if you've ever experienced this, you are not alone. And my guest on the show today is a person who has made it her life mission to help you overcome the challenges that come as a result of you sounding different because maybe you were born in a foreign country or you speak multiple languages, and as such you have an accent on top of your English language. So my guest today is Phyllis Cohen. She's the founder of the Canadian Pronunciation Coach. She works with speakers of English as a second language to maximize their speaking skills, minimize misunderstanding, and build self-confidence and inspire trust through accent management and communication skills. She's based out of Midtown, Toronto, but has been working and doing workshops in Mississauga, where she trains a small group of students on how to optimize their accent so that they do not experience situations that I've mentioned earlier. So she's come on the show today to tell us a little bit more about herself, her background, her business, her experience, and of course, some things that can help us if you were facing a few of those challenges that came up as a result of having an accent. So with that said, Phyllis, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome, Phyllis. So, before we get started into what you do as the Canadian Pronunciation Coach, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. How did you get started on this journey?
I've had a very, very, very varied background, and I actually I was a French major at university, and that's where I got my degree at the University of Toronto, and then I followed that with a very successful career as a performer and a composer and a singing coach. I toured across Canada in a show called Piaf for Songs for Love. It's about Edith Piaf. I did it across Canada, and then I went down to Los Angeles and did it there for a few months, where I won a Critics Award, and at the same time I was also a composer and a vocal coach. But when I came back to Canada from Los Angeles, I knew that there was something missing in my life, even though I continued as a composer and actually worked as a singing coach at York University for many years. I always remembered something that had happened to me where I was trying to rent a house in my home. Mm-hmm. And a young woman called me, and she was inquiring about a room I had for rent in my home. And I asked her about her accent because she had, I thought, the most gorgeous accent, but I couldn't place it. And she kind of bristled. She said, "Oh, you're not going to tell me the room is rented because of my accent?" And I said, "No, actually, I was just asking you because you had such a gorgeous accent." Yeah. And I just didn't know where it was from. And she ended up renting my room, and for about a year, and we talked extensively. And as I had been a language major, and had worked in French extensively. And even when I worked at the Stratford Festival, and I had been there for a few years, whenever I found somebody who was a French speaker, and in fact at that time the head of the music there, who was the conductor and composer there, was francophone. He was a Franco-Ontarian. I would speak French with that person. I loved language so much. I always felt, even though I was composing and I was teaching up at York University, I felt like something was missing. I felt like something was missing. I felt like I wanted to be able to help people whose first language was not English, who were learning English and who had learned English as a second language, who had a heavier accent. I wanted to be able to work with them to help those people. And so I decided ultimately, after a very good career in entertainment, to leave that world. And I went back to get a degree, get my certificate in teaching English as a second language. And at the same time, while I was doing that, and in order to do that, I decided just to work in a bilingual organization again, so that I could keep my language going, keep my extra language going, my French going, because I loved it so much. And I was working among people who were, whose first language was French. And even though my French was very good, I would experience many things. I got laughed at a couple times, about mispronouncing words. In one case, I remember saying something like, j'ai faim, je vais aller acheter un mi-faim. They started laughing. I said, what did I say? You don't say mi-faim, you say a muffin, a muffin. A muffin, an ordinary muffin. It's not a mi-faim, it's a muffin. Okay, Or another case, I said, j'ai un rendezvous chez le chiropracteur, and they didn't even hear the second half of the word, and everybody started laughing at me. I said, why are you laughing at me? Are you going to the surgeon? No, I'm going to the chiropractor. I'm going to the chiropractor. They said, chiropracteur. They said, chiropracteur. They were, I would experience this, we all laughed, and it's good that I had a sense of humor, but I kept thinking, wow, well, what happens if you're not in a situation where you're, that you're supported, where you're looking for work? There was I working. What's it like for other people who experience this kind of, have this experience where their pronunciation is getting in the way, they're not making themselves understood. And so at the same time as I was getting my certificate to teach English as a second language, I also got a certificate to specialize in pronunciation. And so I went out in the world and I started working with other companies, working in various companies, in corporations, big corporations, smaller companies, in the government world, in intergovernmental agencies. And I was working with people from all over the world. And little by little, I decided that, I wanted to go out on my own and focus not just on teaching English as a second language, but focusing on pronunciation, which was really so much a part of who I was as a former musician, also as somebody who had been a performer. So I was very, very conscious of communication skills and how important it is to have those skills in pronunciation, in the use of language, in the language you choose.
Okay, that's a very detailed background journey there, and I was able to pull a few things. But I think I'll start with the most recent one first, which is
sure.
You talked about, before you launched your company, you said you work with intergovernmental agencies and then big corporations. So how did these large organizations identify that pronunciation is actually a big factor in their business for their employees?
Yeah, so again, I worked with advanced speakers and higher level executives, and so they would have their executives move around the world, and they felt that there was this a sense of an inability to not always, but an inability sometimes to connect with team members
Okay.
who were Anglophones, who were native English speakers, because they didn't necessarily have that voice of authority. That comes with a comfort in the language, the use of vernacular, the use of the day-to-day language, pronunciation that would get in the way, where, a team member would kind of raise an eyebrow, like, what did they say? And this kind of thing gets in the way, ultimately, of creating a sense of authority and creating a sense of comfort with your team.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that would be identified, and so I would work with them on that to create a greater sense of comfort in the use of language and, occupation-specific language as well. What is the vocabulary that they would be using on a day-to-day basis? Because that vocabulary that they use on a day-to-day basis to connect with their team members or with other sales representatives carried over into their daily speech.
Okay. Because you'd find that, at least in my own experience working in a corporate environment, that a lot of people, yes, maybe they were born abroad, they come to the I schooled in the US and I started working in corporate America. A lot of people kind of force themselves to drop the way they speak. So that means they lose that native accent that they have, the heavy African accent, and they try to force themselves to speak and to sound North American. And on the other hand, there are people who are like, well, I speak English, I'll just try to speak clearly so that you understand me, and that should be it. Now, I guess my question here is, some of the times I know, at least talking to people and listening to people, especially my friends who were from parts of Asia, they were very shy and insecure about trying to sound too North American, just because it would feel as if they were denying their roots. So has that issue ever come across in your professional life?
Oh, my goodness. That's such a wonderful question, It's such a wonderful question. First of all, I don't believe anybody should set out to lose an accent. There's no reason to lose an accent. We deal with intelligibility and a certain level of comfort. Our accents are a part of who we are, an important part of who we are. And in fact, the more one tries to lose an accent totally, the less likely they are to really succeed in just softening the accent, just dealing with the parts of the accent that are creating lack of intelligibility. And sometimes that little bit of discomfort that says, whoa, where, because we're so used to vocal patterns, we're so used to musical patterns in English that we just kind of jar. We sit back for a minute and we wonder what was said. By the time we figure out what they said, of course, we've stopped listening to content. But I, in fact, most recently had a client who was actually very good ear, and she was in my group class, and she, as we worked together, and she was working on the rhythm of the English, she said to me, "Oh my goodness, I just suddenly had insight into why I've resisted making certain changes, just the little changes that I know make the language flow." And she was picking up this music of the language so well. And she said, I realized that she had been speaking the majority language of the country, but in her community, because she spoke the majority language of that country, which was not English, her own community didn't particularly appreciate it. And so she said, there was a lot of shame associated with that, changing an accent in another language, because it's a betrayal of your own culture. That was such an interesting comment to me. And she said when she realized that, she was able to drop that shame, because she realized that it wasn't a loss of identity to smooth out rough edges of an accent that get in the way of intelligibility. Some of the things, for example, that we have that are part of the vernacular, part of common English, the common daily spoken English, like the sounds like, oh, what do you know? How about that? Or where we reduce sounds. As people pick up these parts of the language, they help the flow of the language. And in fact, clients, as they become aware of that, because what's very, very important is training the ear to hear the difference, because once the ear is trained, you can incorporate sounds into your own language, into your own accent. Once you're able to hear this, you become so aware, these sounds just pop out at you. These little changes pop out at you. And these are the things that make team members feel a little bit more comfortable. And yet there's no sense of loss of identity with incorporating the little changes that are necessary. I never say to clients, lose your accent. And I think anybody who says they should lose their accent or advertises that they are going to lose their accent is that's false advertising. You know, actors need to do that.
Yes.
Actors need to do that because that's their job. Their job is to convince us that they come from another country.
Yes.
You know, and gone are the days when you can have a terrible accent in the movies if you're playing another person. It's a global world. We have film and TV from all over the world. So we expect actors to be darn good to perfect the accent of the country that they are pretending to come from. For that, you work with a dialect coach. For that, you enter into the mentality of the person you're playing, the nationality of the person you're playing. You take it home. You live it all the time. But that's not what business people have to do. That's not what, people in the medical profession have to do. That's not what people in the academia have to do. They need only to smooth out the rough edges that are causing misunderstandings. And what happens is when they find that, my clients find that they're making these little changes, and these changes are noticed, and they're not being asked to repeat themselves, suddenly their own confidence really skyrockets.
Nice. Now, I was just taking notes there real quick. So, all the things you've mentioned thus far, I get a sense of, some repetition coming out in the sense that, there's a lot of musicality in language, in English language in particular, the way we speak. So tell us a little bit about, your training in theater, acting, and music, and how you were able to translate some of the lessons you learned in that field into your training and your teaching people as the pronunciation coach.
Absolutely. Well, I was on scholarships in music throughout school, that was in music, scholarships in music throughout school, and also I studied arranging. When I left, I was studying with an arranging teacher when I left. It's interesting that I actually had not trained as an actor. I started working throughout university as an actor. I just enjoyed it so much. And working actually still in a French environment because I loved language so much. At university, I was doing what they call café théâtre, which is a form of theater that they had in Paris where they were doing small cabarets. And I enjoyed it so much that I took it out into the world. And then actually people just started coming to me to work with me because of my reputation started spreading. And so I started working with people. I mean, I had also studied privately with vocal coaches, vocal teachers. And so I knew a lot about vocal mechanics as it was in terms of the production of sounds. But it really took more than that. And that's what I ended up bringing. It was just my reputation spread. And I started working with a lot of theater and the people in theater because I had done so much and also written musicals. So I was very conscious of of the needs of the voice and of working with actors, creating things that they needed to be able to not just sing, but also act. Mm-hmm. So people were coming to me, and eventually I was recommended to York University and the people there, and actually that's how all that started. And the fact that I had trained as a musician and that I was very conscious of arranging and how all the parts work together, and the importance of communication for the actor, mm-hmm. and also the importance of technique in making sure that you could produce sounds properly to be able to produce the notes. So you had both the music, the sound of the music that comes in, mm-hmm. vocal mechanics. You had the musicality that I was especially aware of, not just as a performer, but as an arranger and as a composer, how important that is. And also just the fact that all language is musical. I brought all that together in order to coach clients. And I really spend quite a lot of time on working with the rhythm and the pitch of the language of clients. So that's how all that came together for me. And that's interesting because people respond to that a lot. I was just working with a client from Israel, a client from Jordan, and both of them talked about how they had never really thought, and also had someone from Lebanon, and they all talked about how they hadn't really thought about the music. And they started looking at their own language differently as well, that they realized that their language had music too. And that it's that music that draws people in. And that's what people connect to. And when you draw in the melody and the rhythm of a language, you appeal to people on a level that's visceral. Yeah. People respond to music viscerally. Yeah. They immediately, it's why music is a universal language, right? Mm-hmm. And so that people are drawn in by the music of a language.
Yeah. And that just reminds me of, I think when I was in grad school, I had to take a foreign language requirement, and part of it was basically listening to the music of the culture before we even started learning the language itself. The professor was like, here's a list of musicians, go find the ones you like and just be listening. And coincidentally, the language I was trying to learn at the time was Hebrew. So I found myself listening to a lot of Hebrew songs to the point where I remembered a long time ago that when we were kids, my mom came to the States for her annual vacation. And then I think my sister wanted one of these Disney movies. So my mom just casually walks into the store and buys the video. It was videotape. She didn't read it. She bought the videotape and brought it back to Nigeria. So we pop it in, and all of a sudden we're hearing Shalom, Shalom, Shalom. We're like, what the heck is this?
What was it?
So it turns out she bought the Hebrew version of Pocahontas.
Oh my, that's hysterical. That is so funny. Oh my gosh.
So we ended up learning all the songs of Pocahontas in Hebrew, not knowing what they were talking, because my sister was like, no, I have the movie here. I'll just watch it and I'll sing the song.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Oh my gosh. So I know the entire score of Pocahontas now in Hebrew.
Oh yeah, I do. And I actually listen to it all the time. Like sometimes when I'm bored, I'll just look for it in on YouTube, and I'll be listening to Pocahontas in Hebrew. I'm like, I'll just be laughing when I remember this.
Oh my gosh, that's a riot. But it's funny because, you're absolutely right, Sheeta. When people are teaching languages, they often will say to them, listen to the songs. And in fact, I was working on learning Spanish too, and they said to us, well, here are songs, fill in the words. fill in the words of the listen to the music, listen to some of the words, and fill in some of the language. And that helped us. The rhythm of it helped us fill in those words. It helped us to really learn the rhythm of the language, the feel of the language. And I think it also creates more of a connection with the language that you're learning and a connection with the accent that you're learning.
I think it does.
For example, with people who work on sales, sometimes they find that they're pushing their customers away inadvertently. They see that their customers are confused. They're not connecting with them. What's that a result of? It's not just the sound of a vowel or the sound of the consonant. It's the music of the language, the rhythms that people connect with that draw them in, that make them feel comfortable. And sometimes also it is just strictly the language that's being used, using more appropriate language, using more colloquial language, being more familiar with the vernacular.
Okay.
So I have people who come from all kinds of sectors. I've had people from, as I said, the health sector. I've worked with people in the financial sector. I've had quite a few people in the financial sector. I just finished working with somebody who is in the financial sector, actually as part of a group class. I have people who are in the public sector, in the academia, and from various places around the world.
Wow. And this is a business you just started last year.
Well, I started it last year. In truth, I kind of started it 2 years ago.
Okay.
I had been working with other companies, but I went out on my own 2 years ago. But in terms of the referrals, I began about 2 years ago. Okay. And then I put up my own website and said, okay, well, do it. Let's say, yes, this is a company and let's move forward. And so, in fact, I've been working particularly in Mississauga these days.
Oh, really?
Where there's a large immigrant community, of course.
I'm actually in Mississauga.
You are? Well, there you are. Gee, what part of Mississauga are you in? I'm based in the GTA, in mid-Toronto, so I may not know where you are exactly.
No, I'm in Clarkson, right by the GO station. So just a 10-minute walk from the GO station. That's where I live in an apartment.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Yeah. It is a beautiful area out there.
Yes, very quiet and family neighborhood. That's what I like. I had a friend who told me, I need to go live in downtown Toronto. I said, I'm not a city person. I'm very quiet and I like to think and I like outdoors. And I like where there are children and families because there's lower crime and everybody's peaceful and relaxed. In the city, people are just too stressed out. I said, no, I can't stay in the city.
It was a good choice. Yeah. It was a good choice since I've been going out to Mississauga. I work at Huddle Space on East Derry Road, where I do monthly workshops now, and also I do my group classes, which is interesting for me because my work before had been online, so now I get to work in person with people again, which I absolutely love. But oh my goodness, just heading out there, to take Lawrence Avenue, which is just so wide and so beautiful and so open and airy, and it's lovely out there. Lovely out there.
When I read your bio, you said there was something here that stuck out to me. It says, let me see because I highlighted it. It said something about native speakers of English get confused when people with accents, or they judge them harshly, or they think they're less intelligent, or they don't make sales, or something like that. From the way you are interpreting this, it's native speakers of English from North America. So in Africa, for example, because we have like a couple hundred languages, they decided, English is going to be the lingua franca as the main language, and then you all have your native languages. So I consider myself as a native speaker of English because I was brought up with English, but I also brought up with like 4 or 5 other languages in school. So when you're looking at it that way, it might just be a difference of pronunciation because the people teaching me, I had British teachers, but I also had Ghanaian teachers. I also had Nigerian teachers. So of course the local pronunciation is difficult and is different from the Canadian or the American version. So would you actually say that a native speaker is only a North American speaker? That's what
I think that's a marvelous question and absolutely appropriate. And I think, when I was talking to you or writing to you about my beginning work on a book, that is the issue of accent modification in a global world, that there are many speakers who are quote unquote native English speakers. So yes, do certain people consider them less intelligent, less whatever, less employable? We have to be open, and we generally are talking about, in this country we will work with, or in North America we'll work with the accents that are common to this part of the world. Yes. The studies that were done, were not done with native English speakers. The studies that were done were with second language speakers.
Okay.
So these, and perhaps I wasn't clear, and that's something that I should certainly make clear in anything that I write. Because I only work with people whose second language is English. They are not native English speakers. Okay. So definitely the studies that were done, and the studies that this came out of actually, that native English speakers perceive people with foreign accents to be less truthful, less competent, less employable, and less able to influence. That actually came out of an extensive study that was done in 2010. This same person and his team of researchers have been doing studies ever since on how native speakers perceive second language, non-native English speakers of English as a second language with heavy accents. So the issue wasn't particularly, are we judging people who have an accent that is different from our own local accent? The issue was, how are people making snap judgments about people who are people who have learned English as a second language? Okay. Yeah, because you know what? There's no doubt, and in fact, I blogged about this, that you hear syllable stress, for example, which is a big one. If you're British born, for example, there are quite a few words. And because if you have any of the British training in terms of speaking English, there are quite a few words where the syllable stress is different from ours. And in fact, where English speakers, even here, native English speakers, even here in North America, are starting to pronounce words differently. They're changing the syllable stress. How important is that? I'm not convinced it's all that important. It's all in terms of, we understand in context and we accept in context. So that's not really a huge issue.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, no, I just wanted to find out because I found it fascinating, and I was like, okay, let's drill down and see, okay, is it North Americans or is it British? Because you could also say, English is actually devised and derived from the British people, so they have the original claim on what an English speaker is actually supposed to be.
Exactly. And look how, the British are quite snobbish about their own.
Yes.
Do you have received pronunciation? Is that correct pronunciation? I remember in the cinema, of course, when, even American speakers all were picking up long ago, if you look at those old movies, and you see people, the actors who were doing these mock British deplorable accents, and in English, even in England, like the lower class always had these, more local accents. And now, of course, as time has passed, you have, for example, Michael Caine in Britain, whose accent was wonderful and adopted, and, it was perfect. On the other hand, take a look at a movie like Trainspotting. When Trainspotting first came out, and it took place in Glasgow, the accent was so difficult to understand, especially for a North American audience, that they dubbed it. People couldn't understand what they were saying.
Wow.
Yeah, because the Glaswegian accent was such a thick, such a local, such a thick accent. People were having difficulty understanding it. So, you have native English speakers, and I remember, in fact, I remember sitting in the airport in where was I? I can't remember. I was in England, and I can't remember which airport I was in, but I was waiting for a flight, and I was sitting reading a book. I had many hours to wait for my flight, and I was listening to some people talking beside me, and I was convinced they were speaking another language. And I wasn't really concentrating. I was reading my book and listening with only one ear. And then I put down my book and I listened carefully and I said, oh, wait a minute. They're speaking English. I had no idea that they were speaking English. And so, I think the thing that we have to remember is that wherever we are, we become accustomed to a certain sound. And our brain perceives that sound with ease. If there's certain accents, and really even if they're native speakers who have a local accent other than our own, that is causing, a lack of intelligibility because it's very far away from what we're used to, that can cause issues. That can cause a lack of intelligibility. But for the most part, I think that, as I say, I deal with speakers of English as a second language where, there are common sounds that are that create a lack of intelligibility. And because it's a brain processing issue, the time that it takes people to understand, to make sense of what they just heard, if it wasn't an expected sound, they lose the connection.
Wow, okay.
And that's the big thing that I work on with my clients.
So before we transition towards the middle part of the show, give us some quick tips, because you've mentioned a lot already in this episode, but in terms of smoothing out the rough edges, what are some quick steps people can start taking today to see some positive changes in their pronunciation?
Okay. Well, for sure, of course, everything depends on what country you come from, what your native language is. But for sure, we have to look. I always say to people, and before they even begin to study with me, I say, take a look, write down what you were saying when someone said to you, what? Can you repeat that? Try and find the patterns, because in those patterns will lie your challenges. People sometimes come and they say, oh, I can't pronounce TH. I have, it always comes out duh. And my response to them always is, it doesn't matter, because TH is really not what's an issue for people. Most people understand a TH that sounds like a D. Look at our Québécois. Most of our Québécois, often they'll speak English, and yet, they will pronounce the D. They won't pronounce the TH. So really, don't make assumptions about what you think people are understanding. Write down exactly what people are asking you to repeat, and you will find the patterns. You'll find the words, the sounds, the vowels that people are confused about. Also, you might not know what it is actually also in what you're saying that's confusing people. And that's why you need to write those down and understand the patterns when you go to an accent pronunciation coach. Or an accent modification coach. The other thing I say to people is take the time to listen to form, not content. And that's a really hard thing to do, because we get lost listening to the content. And not that that's not important. That's incredibly important. Of course, we're interacting with people. We have to know what they're saying. But take a moment and listen to how they say things. Listen to the sound of what they're saying, the form of what they're saying. Did you really think that they said an E sound? When you listen really, really carefully, will you hear an E? Did you really E, or did you hear a different sound? You might not be able to identify it, but what you're assuming that people are saying is not necessarily what they're saying. So I often say to people, shut off from content. And the best way to do that is to overhear what people are saying, to eavesdrop. Which you can do a lot of, because a lot of people are on cell phones these days, whether we like it or not. We're hearing their conversations. So listen very carefully and don't make assumptions about what you're hearing. It's like learning the vernacular, learning how to incorporate some of our short forms, like what did you say? What did you say? Not what did you say, or using contractions. Speakers of English as a second language often don't want to use contractions. I've, you'd, whatever. They don't want to use contractions because they think that's formal speech. And yet we use contractions all the time. If you start listening in a different way, you start listening very, very carefully, you start hearing that people are using those contractions all the time. The only time we don't use them is when we're trying to emphasize something. We really need to make a very serious, emphatic statement. So those are the things that I would say to people beforehand. Listen for the patterns, to understand what it is that people really are not understanding, and you will find patterns if you write it down every time. Listen for the sounds without listening for the content particularly. Don't get engaged in the meaning particularly. Try and listen to how people are saying whatever it is they're saying. And then little by little, you're going to start to see the areas that actually need work. It's often not everything. Okay. It's little things here and there.
Okay. I just remembered something as you were speaking in terms of when it comes to communicating. So if we're in a professional setting, I've taken training from you, Phyllis. I understand how to smooth out the rough edges and to speak and pronounce my words in a way that a native English speaker will understand me clearly. But for some reason, and I know this happens with a lot of my friends, where if we're communicating and we're in a setting with mixed companies, so take for example North Americans or Asians, we'll try and make sure that we smooth out our accents and whatnot. But the moment I get a phone call from my brother or my sister back home in Nigeria, all that goes out the window. I don't think about it. I start communicating. The way they sound is the way and people will turn around and are like, wow, you have a very thick Nigerian accent. I'm like, that wasn't supposed to come out. Why is it that the brain does that thing where you're talking with people that are familiar to you and then it automatically switches back to, the familiar way you communicate with them, and then when you're now in company, you now consciously start to protect yourself and smooth out your accent. How does that work, and is there any way to try and keep it from going back so often? Because my mom will tease me whenever she calls me and she'll be like, oh, Mr. Canada. I'll be like, hey, how you doing? And then after a while, I'll be like, okay, knock it off.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. Well, I guess, there's understanding on both sides, There are people who can just switch back and forth depending on whom they're talking with. And, there are other people who just make that decision that they're going to just make whatever changes they feel they need to make to smooth out their accent with the local English speakers. And I guess it's, to a certain extent, it's all conscious, right? I mean, it's a question of, do we want to adopt this softened accent all the time, in which case it takes tremendous concentration. It's not something that comes overnight. It's not something that comes in 10 hours of practice. It's constant. And I think, it almost becomes a personal choice. I mean, are we going to just keep the softened accent going and just accept the judgment of our friends and family who say, "Oh my gosh, you're a sellout," and they might say it as a joke or they might say it with judgment, and only you know what their intention is. And some people just switch back and forth, they've gone back to their country for a while and then they come back and it takes a while to soften that accent again. It takes a while, When I'm with the Quebecois and I'm speaking French, my accent is a little bit more Quebecois. When I'm with the Parisians or with the French-speaking French, my accent in French becomes a little more French. I mean, I think that there is an understanding that all of us have to have. Language is fluid. Accents can be fluid. Anybody who lives in a certain environment all the time, there will be some things in their accent that inevitably change. And I think we have to decide, what do we want to do with that? And I don't think anybody can give anybody a tip on what to do about it. I think ultimately it's the choice of the person who's working on managing their accent for professional purposes. So I don't know I don't know whether your family's giving you a rough time there, Chi, or your friends are giving you a rough time. Only you know that. And I don't know if you have to say to them, "I just need to be consistent. Give me a break. I'm living in Canada now. I'm living in Toronto, But we have to know our reasons. And kind of make those choices, and I think ultimately, we become confident enough in our ability to, make whatever changes we need to make in our accent for professional purposes, that we either make sure that we're aware of that 24/7 and we live it, and we use that with our friends and family, or we just accept the fact that we only use it when we need to use it, and we're confident enough that we know when we need to use it.
Okay. As we transition into the final segment of the show, I just have a couple wrapping up questions for you. And I think the first one is going to start around, centered around your business, which is what were some of the struggles you faced launching this business, and how were you able to overcome them?
Oh, well, I mean, the struggles are always the struggles of somebody launching a business. How do you get known? How do you get the word out there? For me, obviously, it began with referrals. And it was the referrals that built. And I started just doing lots of networking, particularly, as they say, in Mississauga, and partnering with somebody in Mississauga who owned the space, who was very encouraging and very supportive. And so, it was in her space that I began doing my monthly workshops, and also when we have enough people to do small group classes. I also have I had been doing a YouTube video that was more focused just on pronunciation. It was actually quite time consuming because I did it all myself, and so I found that I wasn't able to do that monthly. And so now I'm actually doing a weekly video with my daughter, and so I'm keeping that going, and the response to that has been really great. And that's a weekly series. The blogging regularly as well. well, going into that social media side that I had never really been aware of. I had never really been a social media person, so that's something that I've had to be aware of. Taking every opportunity for doing presentations with people, to make them aware of what I do and how I do it. And in my monthly 2-hour workshops, people get a taste of all the issues in accent management and also the issues that I address with them. So that's really the way things have been building. And, the Twitter stuff, I'm not so great with the Twitter stuff, I have to admit. I'm better with the LinkedIn stuff, this kind of just do it in a few words. I'm probably a little too wordy for that, but, Yeah. But, yeah, that's the way I've been building, and it has been building steadily from that.
And that's quite understandable because I think it is a smarter strategy to start with one platform, master that platform, and then move on. Because once people know about you there, then you get more organic referrals, and then you say, okay, I can now put this a little bit on autopilot. Let me try and master something else. So yeah, if your strengths are not in Twitter and they're more in LinkedIn, because from what we've discussed on the show thus far, I can tell that you work with people of a more professional background. So therefore, I mean, the place where professionals congregate is LinkedIn. Yes, there are people on Twitter, but to get the attention of a professional, it's most likely LinkedIn is where your market is going to be. So I think that's a good strategy. So,
exactly. Thank you.
On the personal side, what are some of your favorite things to do in the GTA when it comes to either going to a restaurant or going out for a good time with your friends and your family? What do you enjoy in the area?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think Toronto's a great city. I love Toronto. I love Toronto in the summer. There are all kinds of things going on by the lake, along Harbourfront. But I also am very much a nature person. And I don't know if you know that Toronto actually, I believe, has one of the longest networks of ravines in the world.
No, I did not know.
Yeah, we do. We have so many parks, so many networks of ravines that cross Toronto. In fact, we have a ravine system that goes along the Humber River right out into, right way out into, have you ever been, well, you haven't been there that long, but check out, it's called, now wait a minute, I believe it's Humber College in the West End, and it goes right along the Humber River, and you can walk all along there, and they have beavers there, and they have the great blue heron there, and they have egrets there. So you can go all along, walking along ravines all through Toronto, through the Humber River, the Don River. We have kayaking along, on the Don River and the Humber River. I mean, we have the Humber River in the west end of Toronto, not as far as you end, but, around the Old Mill subway on Bloor Street. And if you go to the ravine behind that, there's kayaking, there's canoeing, there's marshland. It'll take you out into Lake Ontario. You can go, there's even a salmon run. You can see salmon jumping over a dam there at the right time of the year. Our city is so beautiful. We have so many wonderful ravines. Not only do we have a lot of entertainment happening here, not just the smaller theaters, not just the festivals, and we have lots of festivals in the summer, outdoor festivals in the East End of Toronto, an outdoor festival at High Park, lots more smaller companies that are now doing festivals in the smaller ravines and areas and parks around Toronto. We also have the Mirvish series that brings in internationally renowned theater. So you can enjoy all these cultural experiences here, and yet in the city itself, enjoy nature. It's a wonderful city, a wonderful city.
Awesome. And do you have any favorite restaurants or places to go to that you would recommend in addition to what you just mentioned?
Vegetarian. I'm vegetarian. So
that's okay.
limited in my restaurant. And I'm trying to remember the name of the restaurant because there was a restaurant I just went to the other day and I can't remember the name. It's killing me. But you can always find it online, and it serves this incredible vegan Big Mac.
Wow. Vegan Big Mac.
And it's on Queen Street, west of Dufferin, on the south side. But my goodness, there are restaurants opening up all the time. And actually, I'm set to start visiting a few others. If you like Middle Eastern food, we've got a great restaurant called the Jerusalem Restaurant. Oh, my gosh, the food is so good. It's so good. As a matter of fact, I'm going out with friends next week, Tuesday night. We're going to go up to the Jerusalem in the north end of the city, quite far up on Leslie. And I had always gone to the one that was in the center part of the city that began as this tiny, tiny little hole in the wall and now is busy every night and sold out every night. But I understand that the one up north, and the food is fantastic, has belly dancing and people dance. And that one, it's not like that one in the central part of Toronto. That one is just food. Just food. But the one up north actually has a whole buffet, and it's supposed to be just fantastic. So yeah, we've got some really good places, but there are new restaurants opening all the time. My goodness, all the time. I recommend that people go to BlogTO and subscribe, because on BlogTO every day there are new things and new restaurants and the activities of the weekend, and I mean it'll keep you up to date on everything that's happening.
Yeah. I've made a note of that, and I'll put that in the show notes. And my second to the last, well, I guess this will be my last question because I'll transition into getting information from you. But so what's the favorite thing about working with your daughter in your business?
Well, I am so lucky because I have a really great relationship with my daughter. And my daughter she's a producer and an actress, and she's done so many things in her life and worked for Global TV before it even became Chorus TV when it was taken over. We have a very good relationship. And the thing I love about working with her is, A, she's very easy to work with. And B, that we have, I will often present episodes to her, and then essentially we have you could almost call it a play reading. Well, we'll read it out loud and say, well, what works, what doesn't work? What will our speakers of English as a second language, understand or not understand? And I'm even getting people who are not speakers of English as a second language who just get a kick out of the video. So, the fact that we can bounce ideas against each other and just laugh, because we have a lot of fun, kind of making fun of each other on the videos and still presenting a different word of the week, is a real pleasure for me. And she feeds me in terms of ideas that I can use for the future to present to the watchers of my YouTube videos. So I can't say enough great things about my daughter, Netta. She's just great. So I feel really blessed, I have to say.
That's awesome. And that's it, Phyllis. We've reached the end of the show. It's been fun talking to you for the past 1 hour. I know we were going to do 30 minutes, but time flies when you're having fun.
It's been a delight speaking with you, Chi.
But before I let you go, tell us a little bit more about where people can find you and possibly reach out to you if they want to learn more about you, the pronunciation coach, and everything else you're doing.
Lovely. They can go to my website, which is www.canadianpronunciationcoach.com, and they can reach me via my email address at phyllis@canadianpronunciationcoach.com, and also via Skype at Canadian Pronunciation Coach and the Canadian Pronunciation Coach. And I just love hearing from people. You can also reach me through my blog, which is on WordPress. Again, Canadian Pronunciation Coach. It's always easy. Or you can reach me through my YouTube videos. Again, Canadian Pronunciation Coach YouTube. It's my great pleasure to hear from people. I just love to hear from people. And, as I say, I work with small groups. I work with small groups online, and I also work with small groups at Huddle Space. I don't like to work with big groups because you know what? When you have big groups, you don't really get to work with people very well. So I make a point of keeping my groups very small so that everybody gets individual attention. But I also work with people online, with people across the country, with people in the world. So I'm always available through Skype as well.
Okay. And I'll be sure to make a note and a list of all that on the website once this episode is published and ready to go live. So Phyllis, my friend, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I really had a fun time learning more about you and your business, and of course, how to make myself a better speaker of the English language. So thanks for coming on the show, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
That's it, people. Another fantastic episode of the GTA Business Titans podcast. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast today and got some great info out of it, don't be stingy. Share with a friend and leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. Also, if you need any help with your online marketing needs, feel free to reach out to me at www.odogwu.com. That's www.odogwu.com. Or you can email me on info@odogwu.com. Or you just hit me up on this GTA Business Titles podcast website, and I'll be sure to respond to you. We help local businesses get more leads and sales from the internet using tools like Facebook advertising, Instagram ads, landing pages, website creation, online funnels, and so much more. So if you want to turn clicks into customers, there's only one name to call in the GTA, and that's Chiodogwu at www.odogwu.com. Till next time, guys. Be a titan, be great, make something great happen in your life today. Bye.